Okay, here we go. Call the meeting to order. Will the clerk call the roll?
Mark?
Here.
Cindy? Here. Good job. Bob?
Here.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Jay?
Here. Okay, we have a full assembly today. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have two topics on today's agenda. The first, let's go to visitors' views related to the agenda. And I see no visitors in the audience today, so we will move to bid awards, which is the next item on the agenda. 16-054, bid award for municipal building / police department renovation project. I'd entertain a motion to award the bid to the lowest bidder.
So move.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to award the bid to McG Constructors Incorporated / DCI joint venture. They were the apparent low bidder with a base bid of $6,307,000. The total bid with all four alternates is $6,852,300. Intent to award the project to McG Constructors Incorporated / DCI joint venture was issued on March 3rd, 2016. A project description with a detailed description for each of the four added alternatives is included in this packet. So, discussion.
Could we, I'd like to discuss that south parking alternative 3 and what was involved and what the ramification would be if we were to leave that out.
Steve, you want to answer that, or
Actually,
Chief?
probably best would, you want Corey to handle that?
Yeah,
Chief, or-
Corey wants to give the technical specifics, and then I can fill in if that's okay.
Are you with us, Corey?
Yeah, I am. So can you all hear me pretty well?
Yep, bring it in.
Great. So the south parking lot alternate does a couple of things. One of the major concerns when we first started doing this project about whether or not the municipal building was appropriate to house the police station in the long term was the exiting out of the south parking lot for police vehicles because of the limited visibility north up along Nordic. So the main reason for the south parking lot alternate was to reorient the exit out onto Nordic Drive further south so that it lines directly up with Birch Street, so that an emergency vehicle or a police vehicle quickly trying to get onto Nordic has a better view north around the corner of the building. There's a couple other things that so that's the main thing we do. We swing the exit directly in line with Birch Street. And then along with that, we also reconstruct the carport that's to the south. Now we take that down and we reconstruct it out of steel and translucent fiberglass roofing, and then make a matching one on the other side so that all the police vehicles can be under cover. And we also add one more parking space. They're a little bit limited now in their parking and will be even more so when we cut the hole in the side of the building for the exit out of the sally port. And so to gain a parking space back, we do a small little retaining wall kind of in the very far southwest corner of the parking area. So it's those things. It's reorienting the parking, building those carports, and then the small little retaining wall is the reason for the price.
So I guess the other side of my question, Corey, is then what's the downside if we don't do it? This is part of this one. I noticed that when you compare the bids of all of them, these people were essentially I believe the highest of the four.
Yep.
And so if we were to leave it out and to then turn around and do it later, I'd like to understand the ramifications or the implications of that.
Yeah, I think there wouldn't be any reason that it couldn't be done later. I think one thing that I would caution you a little bit on is that the money to have somebody come in at a later time and do the work may be higher than the bids you're seeing here because you would have a remobilization. But it certainly is, all of the alternates, the project can proceed without doing them. So it won't damage the project if you don't award it now and decide to do it at a later time. The other issue could be that, you don't award it now and see how the project goes, and because all the work that's going to happen in that south parking lot is in phase 2, which isn't scheduled to happen, for over a year from now. So you could even award it to the same contractor at a later date. Of course, they wouldn't honor this price necessarily, so there would be a renegotiation that would have to take place.
Okay.
Eric?
Good question too. So if you do move it further south toward Birch Street and closer to Hammer Slough, would there be any problems interfering with the historical district, the historical properties on that slough? There was nothing? Nothing yet?
What historical?
I can answer. It's just
It's on the property. We're not actually, expanding outside of the property. We're just
Moving.
juggling things around a little bit within the property lines.
Okay.
So, okay, that makes sense.
I want to ask Kelly if he has anything to say.
Kelly, do you want to add anything about your feelings about the parking lot staying in the bid?
I do agree with what Corey's saying. There is another issue with that sight line to the south with that existing structure. It's hard to see vehicles that come around the curve there when they're coming north with that existing parking structure sitting the way it is now. So that is another concern. I agree that this should be looked at as an alternate, that we can live without it. I think that it would meet some needs and would improve our operations having it. I also agree that it's never going to be as cost effective down the road as it is right now. And the other thing is, I thought about it from a cosmetic standpoint. We're going to have this nice new building, and do we want to have this old parking structure that's there detracting from that building? Carl and I have talked about a couple different options, and there's some things we can do, but the short answer is we would love to have it, but we can live without it if we absolutely have to.
Okay, any other discussion? So then I guess we'll have to,
I have one question. Carl, is there any chance that kind of a project could be done in-house?
There absolutely is. In fact, part of that, the work to demolish the existing carport would be done by Public Works if this alternate was awarded. So there are some things that can be done that I haven't really looked at the design for the new canopies very much, so I don't know, if that's within our abilities in Public Works. It surely can be, put out to bid in the future if it's something that we're uncomfortable with doing, which could possibly be the case.
Yeah.
But
Well, and my follow-up question to that was, if we did it in-house, would there be any realized savings? We might be able to do it, but we might not save any money doing so.
yeah, it's hard to say. I haven't really looked at it
Okay.
From that perspective.
Nancy?
I have a question about the retaining wall. Describe it for me.
Did you hear that, Corey?
Sorry, should I jump in on that?
Sure.
So it's just in the far southwest corner. So kind of right now, if you were looking, if you were standing with your back to the building and you were looking at that existing wooden carport, it'll be off to the right-hand side of it. So right now, it's just a slope down to the slough there. And because we're going to be reconfiguring things, we're essentially putting one more parking space where right now there's just a slope down to the slough. So we're just taking sort of an L-shaped concrete retaining wall and putting it into that corner to give one last parking space, and then that also serves as the foundation for the columns on that end for the south carport. It doesn't actually, the bottom of the retaining wall is nowhere near tide water or anything else. It's pretty high up on the slope. I believe it's only about 5 foot tall or so at the tallest portion, but it just is a way of getting a little bit more parking in that far sort of wasted zone back there.
So Corey, the retaining wall is going to be constructed out of concrete?
Correct.
It's
Yes.
so-
poured-in-place concrete foundation.
Okay, so would it be able to be constructed with a riprap wall if we didn't do this in the future by a local contractor?
Well, because we're also using it as the foundation for the column for the carport, it couldn't all be riprap, so there would have to be some combination of, so we combined the two because we thought it was more efficient to do that rather than pouring a footing for the column and then building riprap around it. But, there wouldn't be any reason you couldn't do it that other way and have to, do it out of riprap.
Right, well, we don't want
I would have to talk to Mark Husich a little bit about the design of that. One of the concerns was we didn't want to have it, like a battered wall that went too far down into the slough, because as soon as you get into any sort of the tidal, area, then all of a sudden you're getting core permits and all the rest of it. So a straight up and down concrete wall had some advantages there. Whether or not, we couldn't do a riprap and avoid that, I'd have to dig into it a little bit.
Okay, I guess my concern is to try to keep the project as inexpensive as we can. That doesn't seem like a lot of money, but $213,000 is a pretty good sized chunk of money. And I kind of think that if it went out to bid locally, you might find somebody that could build that kind of a structure fairly easily. But that's just my thought. As long as the parking lot's functional and the sally port's functional with the parking lot and parking garage, if it stays like it is. So that's just my thought on it. So, Bob? Go ahead. Kurt?
You want to stay on the same subject? Go ahead, I'm going to change subjects.
I was on the same, but when you did I'm sure you did core samples of the soils and stuff down there. When you were doing the design, what effect is the soil such that we won't have sloughing, and in other words, it's going to be stable enough without it right now?
I would have to defer to Mark on that. I'd have to examine that. He was not concerned about stabilizing the slope. The reason for that retaining wall was just to push the flat portion of the site farther to the southwest. Okay. So he never raised with me an issue of slope stabilization. I mean, even along the kind of the west edge of the parking lot now, which just slopes steepishly down to the slough. We're not doing anything new there. So except for this retaining wall to bump out the parking, we were not doing any slope stabilization there.
Thank you.
Kurt, you had a different topic?
Yeah, my topic for you, Corey, is why didn't Dawson just put a bid in on this project by themselves? How come they're in cahoots with McGraw? Because, we haven't had...
Interesting question. So I had the same question. So I called the project manager, and which is actually Chad McGraw, now working for Dawson, and asked him that. And so what he told me was that Dawson, has a good presence in Southeast. They don't actually have a lot of laborers. So they've got a good administrative presence, and of course they've got the strong back office in Bellingham, but they don't have a whole lot of people on the ground that can swing a hammer. So because now Big G, which is just a reconstructed McGraw custom construction, has years of having laborers and superintendents on the ground, they found that it was an advantageous relationship for them to form this joint venture. It's not the first project that they've done together. Since McGraw kind of got reformed after they had that relationship with the North Slope Company a couple of years ago, ASRC, they have done projects together with Dawson in Sitka. So they're rebuilding the big Centennial Hall, the Harrigan Centennial Hall in Sitka right now with exactly the same relationship. And so what we're going to see on this project is that Dawson will be, it's going to be their home office. So all of the paperwork, the pay requests, the payroll, and everything will be managed by Dawson. But they won't actually have a whole lot of people on the ground. And I have to say the latest projects that we have done with Dawson have all been that way, where Dawson actually didn't have, in fact, they subcontracted out almost everything on every project that we've done lately. So on the Petersburg project, they are just going to sub out the labor to McGee or MCG. I'm not sure actually what they call themselves. And so the laborers that you're going to see, the guys actually doing the carpentry work and the concrete work, will be longtime McGraw laborers, and the project superintendent, the guy who's there managing those people, will also be an MCG person. But everybody else, kind of from there on up, everybody else managing the subcontracts and doing the the overall project administration will be Dawson people.
So are you saying then the person that's going to supervise the project, that's actually going to see if they put the nail in the right place, is going to be an MG employee and not a Dawson employee?
That is what, yes, I believe so. So all of this is, it's kind of an informal conversation I had with Chad, but that is their plan. So I have to say that the name of the person that they have given me so far is the person that just built the UAS dormitory for us here in Juneau. So that was I believe a $15 million project that just got completed last fall. His name is Matt Herrick, and he did a terrific job. So it was, at the time, it was McGraw, or pardon me, it was ASRC McGraw was the company. So it was, the home office was in Anchorage or Fairbanks, I don't remember. It was the North Slope Company, ASRC, affiliated with McGraw, but all the guys on the ground were McGraw people, and the superintendent, Matt Herrick, was also a McGraw employee.
So is Matt still on the payroll?
Yeah, and the other name that was floated was Chris LeBlanc, who's another person I have not worked with directly, but he would be on McGraw's payroll too. So the way that they've set it up is it's a joint venture between the two companies. But MCG is a subcontractor to that joint venture doing the $1.3 million worth of carpentry and contracting work, or carpentry and concrete work. Dawson is not listed as a subcontractor because they're not doing anything on site. They're doing the administration and running the project.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Corey. There's just some suspicions that I've had about McGraw over the years. But I think with Dawson in charge of, the books and the paperwork and stuff, I'm a little more settled on that idea. So thank you.
Any more, Eric?
So Corey, you mentioned then that Dawson's going to be involved in another project, the Centennial Hall project, or a Harrigan project up in there in Sitka. Will there be any issues with McGraw and Dawson not being able to make schedule due to their workload?
Well, again, I'm not 100% certain. A lot of this was just sort of Chad and I convincing. But what he told me, and I haven't followed up on it, was the reason that they're doing this as a joint venture is because they have finished up Centennial Hall almost 4 months early. And so what he told me was that project is pretty much complete, and so they would just be, wrapping that up to start this one, and that's why they thought that the two projects meshed very well. So as far as I know, the McG crew or MCG crew is coming from Sitka to work on this project. It won't be happening simultaneously.
Any other input? Bob?
Yeah. The only other thing I want to do is, I don't know if it's appropriate here, but I want to talk about an inspector if we decide to award before we get done. But we can do that later.
That's up to you, Mayor.
Well, I feel we should have an inspector on the job, and it's not part of this $6,800,000 and some thousand project if you add all the alternatives. So is that going to add another couple $100,000 to the project? Isn't that what was budgeted before, Corey? Do you have those numbers?
So the project costs that you had in front of you, we have there's a construction administration portion of the design contract. And so you would have all of us still involved with doing the office work. And then you have a $180,000 line item for an on-site COR person. So how we work that out, that's still a conversation that needs to happen. The $180,000 was based on Dan LaForce's contract overseeing the Petersburg Library. And I apologize, I don't have exactly the number sitting in front of me, but that was not a full-time position. I believe it was about 30 hours a week that Dan did on-site for a shorter amount of time. So the $180,000 is probably, it's a line item in there, but it will not be enough to have somebody on-site every day, all day to watch it. I think, we were looking forward to, once we got done with this, awarding the contract, discussing how that should be formulated and as part of the next steps. But I would say the amount of money you have currently in the project budget will not be enough for a full-time person to be on there. Whether or not that's required, I think, is another question.
And so that is $180,000 worked into this bid amount?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would back up one click and say, when we did the library project, we had less than that. I don't remember what the number was, 120 or 150. And we put it out for bids and didn't get any bids at that amount. And the lowest bid was 180, and that's what we based this line item on.
I'm in the wrong line of work. So,
Yeah, I think
Jay?
just echo both your thoughts and Member Lynn's thoughts. I think on the library project, which was a McGraw project, having an on-site supervisor there regularly, I think, was a key component to the success of that project, and I would feel very strongly about having the same involved in this one.
So Corey, with your experience, would it be more important to have an inspector on site when you first start the project? I mean, on this building, when you're going and digging into the foundation, that's, I don't want to say predicted because that, but I mean, is said to be in sound condition. It makes sense to have to have someone that's knowledgeable on site when you first start. Does that make any sense, or?
It does. So let me just say, when we talk about inspections, that's not exactly the right term. The person that we're talking about here is not going to be inspecting the work. He's going to be there kind of being your eyes and ears on the project. So he's not, he's not a technical inspector, but he's got to be somebody that has enough knowledge about the project and about construction in general that he can see, he can convince with the contractor, he can see where there are potential problems, and more importantly, he can track the work that's being done and watch it with the schedule. So, we kind of call those people contract administrators more than technical inspectors. With some technical inspections happen, but those will be people you'll bring in engineers to do, to look at where the rebar is sitting and look at the concrete pour. And we don't have a ton of that structural work on this project, but those technical inspections you're going to bring in an engineer for. The person we're talking about here doesn't have to be an engineer, but he or she needs to be a good administrator and somebody that can watch the project. And so then to answer your specific question, yes, I think what's going to be critical is the initial stages. And so one of the conversations that we wanted to have, and I started it with Carl a little bit, was we were debating whether or not it would make more sense to have a much stronger role for me at the beginning of this project, working with whoever is going to take it over and be the day-to-day person, as opposed to what we did on the library, which was, that person starts at the very beginning and they watch the project, but they have a long time to get used to the project because, if you remember how the library started, there was a lot of grubbing and excavation that had to happen, and slowly the trades came in and ramped up on the project. So Dan had a long time where he could get familiar with the documents ahead of the project really starting. And this one, because we're going to boom out of the gate, start to demolish things and really get into, the specifics of what gets torn apart and what doesn't, we were wondering whether or not it makes sense for me to be there often, because I'm going to know more about the project at the beginning than anybody else does, and then the person, Dan or whoever applies for it, can start to take that over once they get familiar. Otherwise, it feels like there's going to be a lot of me on the phone trying to explain it anyway. And all this, we can have further discussions about. But so I guess the short answer is yes. I think it's going to be critical to have somebody early, and it's going to be critical to have somebody that really understands a lot about the project at the beginning.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Eric?
Is Corey's time budgeted in for that?
Yeah, yeah.
Part of this $180,000 would pay for your time then, Corey, as well as, well, it sounds like we need more than that to have someone on site, even part-time to complete the project.
Well, it depends on how much representation you're going to want to have. You know, I think the 180 will be fair if somebody from Public Works can do, kind of come by daily and do the recording of who's there, supplementing, the on-site presence by somebody that you hire specifically. If you want to hire somebody specifically to be there full-time and really watch it for the length of this project, then I don't think 180 will probably be enough for that. Now, I guess what I would say is, different municipalities do this differently. So in the project we just finished in Cordova, a big project, the Cordova Center there, they didn't hire anybody at COR. They did it all in-house. So the Public Works Director and his staff, he basically gave somebody full-time over to that project. And so the budget, it wasn't something that came out of the budget. In Petersburg, of course, for the library, we hired somebody specific to do it. So, I think that's a conversation to have with Carl about whether or not he's comfortable or has the staff to do this in-house, or if it's somebody they entirely need to hire out.
What do you think, Carl?
Well, I think we could help a little, but I don't think I have a guy that I could put down here 100% of the time. And I think it's more geared towards Joe Bertignoli's skill set than somebody at Public Works.
Yeah. Well, and I can speak a little bit to that. One of the reasons we haven't addressed this is because we didn't know what the budget was going to be to work with, other than the 180. We kind of wanted to see what bids were like, and then, okay, now we know, do we have money to expand the inspection, or what do we have to live with? I've talked to Joe B. He's not comfortable. I mean, he's comfortable being here, and Corey can speak to his involvement in the library project, who he was very involved. We can continue that level the same, but to actually be here 24/7, or 7 days a week when the contractor's working, we're less certain. We can obviously stop code enforcement and delay building inspections and things like that if need be, and Joe can provide quite a bit of expertise. But as an example, Joe B is not an electrician, so he has less knowledge of those things. So it's going to be. Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
Well, so I guess what I would say, again, what I was trying to say before, so the person really needs to have kind of two skills, but the most important one, I think, is just eyes on the project. So that he's there, again, he or she is there seeing who is working and seeing, what the manpower is and recording every day what the general activities are. And so, that's not a technical engineering or building background that you really need. You really just need to count up the people and make sure they're working. And so, that saves us from, if we get into a dispute later on, then we can go back and say, well, yeah, okay, you're not done with the project, but you guys took off 2 weeks here to go moose hunting, or whatever. That we have a record of who's on the project, who's working. Yep. So there's that aspect, and I think, so Joe is more than capable of doing that. And again, Dan did that on the library, but in some ways he had more technical expertise than you needed for that. So that's one layer, and that's the person that really needs to be there every day, all the time. Not all the time, but regularly, every day, certainly. So we have a record of what they're doing and how many people are doing it.
So you're just...
And I'm not anticipating we're going to have a problem with this, but it just saves us if there's a delay claim later on. And then there's the technical aspect. So they say they run into a problem. They're looking at a detail. They uncover something. It can't be built that way. They have a question about well, it showed no concrete here, but there's actually a concrete wall we didn't know about. What are we supposed to do about that? And so then having a person on site or easily on the phone that can answer those technical questions, that's where you get into the technical expertise needed. Now, any question like that, the design team is standing by ready to answer them. I think in this case, again, it seems like it makes sense for me to be there as much as I can, so I don't have to get an email and try and get the problem described to me in pictures and drawings. I can just be there trying to figure it out with them at the beginning. But if you want an on-site person to do that more full-time than I will be able to do it, then we're going to have to hire somebody. And then that's probably not Joe B. or anybody from the Public Works Department. That's somebody that has a contracting background.
Okay.
So what does the assembly want? It becomes a question. I mean,
That's
obviously,
right.
we can internally make it happen. There's some trade-offs, and it won't be, the technical expert, as Corey indicates.
Bob, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, I really think we need somebody on board all the time. There's too many facets to this and too many things we have a potential to run into, I believe, if we award it. And then I agree with Corey. The other part of that is that person you have on the ground daily also has a chance to take pictures, which ends up as part of the record, which also is if you have to go back and do, remedial action on something, makes a big difference.
Right, exactly.
Cindy?
I'm just curious to know, Corey, is there an estimate of what a potential additional amount of money would be needed above the $180,000 that is currently
Well, I'd have to dig into it a little bit. To be honest, we were surprised when the bids for the library came in that high. And I think that what we ran into was, I think Dan was charging a lot of per diem to be there. He had the cabin in town, but essentially he was living in Juneau and was traveling back and forth. Pardon me. I think we were anticipating with the library that we would be able to find a local contractor who just was interested in doing this for 12 months, and $180,000 for a 12-month contract seemed more than generous to us for that kind of, the participation. But then what we found was there just wasn't anybody in Petersburg that was willing to take a year out of their normal practice to do this. Mm-hmm. And so then we were paying per diem. So that's a long way of saying, I think we're going to have to think about it, and it may be that, maybe labor has changed and there is somebody in town now that would be willing to do it.
Because I'm trying to get a handle on, if we forego the south parking lot, that's $213,000. We've got $700,000 in contingency. Before we even get started, we're talking about eating into that for additional contract administration. And I kind of want to have a sense of how much we're leaving ourselves for contingency if we go that route.
Jay?
I guess to answer your question directly, Steve, you're talking about wanting direction from the assembly is, I think that role, having someone on site is for lack of a better way to put it, a really important insurance policy for the project. And I agree that, I know we've discussed this idea of, we're bouncing around of in-house. As Carl has spoken to and you've spoken to, it doesn't sound like a really great feasible or desirable plan for the two of you, and or maybe what you'd not prefer. And also I like the idea of having someone outside where that is their sole job that they're contracted to do more specifically. So there's my direction, at least, for whatever it's worth.
I mean, one thing we can do is, we can throw it out to the community and see if there's somebody out there. I mean, again, we have not done that up to this point. We may have somebody that's very capable that's willing to do it, and for what we have budgeted or less. I mean, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Of course, I would just say, there's two ways of advertising for this. One is we can say, okay, this is what we want. Here's the job description. It's 40 hours a week. It's going to be an 18-month contract. We expect you there every day. Give us a price, which is basically what we did on the library. The other thing we can say is we have $180,000. We're looking for, that maximum price guarantee. The project length is 18 months. What are you prepared to give us for that? too. You know, again, the contractors are going to be there a lot more than 40 hours a week, particularly during the summer months. And so I don't necessarily think that you want or would have to pay for somebody to be watching them every hour they're on site, right? And you just need a regular presence, you know, maybe daily, maybe most days, but a regular presence there. And again, that's what Dan did. Dan was, I think he was a 4-day-a-week guy, and you know, there were a couple of weeks that he took off and was just in Juneau, and there wasn't really a presence on site, and the project went fine. So I think, you know, we could definitely work within that $180,000 if we don't want to go over it, and we're prepared to flex a little bit on the scope.
It seems to me like it could be a combination of things, hiring somebody with the expertise and then having someone like Joe B. from the borough there when things aren't that technical on a daily basis and not 8 hours a day, just to see how the project's going and to document it, you know, the number of workers on the job, and just a thought that might be able to work.
I was going to ask about Steve about the fire hall, because we hired locally for contract admin there, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
About how much did we pay for that?
A lot.
That's what I was thinking.
A lot more than 180.
Do you know what the length of that contract was, Steve?
No, it was underway when I got here. Carl, do you remember?
I'm not completely sure. I think it was at least 12 months.
Did you hear that, Corey?
It was only 12. Okay, so it'll be a longer contract.
Yeah.
Well, the pad got put in first, and then it sat for a little while, and then I think the building was constructed, if I recall. But
Right. We had the same individual do inspection or offer those services for both phases of the fire hall, but there was a large amount of time in between the phases that he was not performing. So.
But that individual was somebody local, so you weren't paying per diem and travel and other associated costs.
Yeah.
okay, so I guess we need to discuss which way we want to go, what alternates we want to add into the bid. If Jody gave a pretty good little spreadsheet here on how we, you know, if we assume 50% of the contingency is needed, and you can read it just as easy as I can, but how much we'll need. But maybe we won't need any contingency. Then we'd have money in there to pay. It's a tough call which way to go on, especially on the inspector type position. But you know, there is a couple people in town. Alan Murph is the name that was kicked around earlier today. I don't know if he's retired from the Forest Service or not. No, he is. So maybe he'd be interested in doing. I don't know how. You mean? I wouldn't call it putting the cart before the horse, but I guess in a way it is if we need to award the bid, I feel. Hopefully we can work something out with the inspection, or it's not called inspection, but you know, the looky loos. Yeah.
Honest administrator,
Right.
there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's better.
I would move that we award the bid and exclude alternative 3 at this point, which is the south parking.
Is there a second to
I'll
that?
second that.
Okay, so it's been moved by member Lynn, seconded by member Walhooter to award the bid, if I heard you right, without alternate 3 included in the bid?
Correct.
Any discussion on that approach? Eric?
Okay, well, so we just heard, though, that we do have the ability within this 18 months while the contractor's here to re-award that if we do feel that we can fit within our budget.
Yeah, I think we had that.
Just jump in on that real quick. So the alternate price is good for 100 days. So basically we have 3 months from when you open the bid that price of whatever they gave you was $213,000 is binding. So if, you know, midsummer you decide you want to do it, you can still have it for that $213,000. After that, then we would have to, you know, ask them to give you a new price. But they'd be happy to give you a new price on that probably at any time. They'll be happy to have the work.
Yeah. That's interesting. Jay?
Yeah, tying into this then, maybe this isn't right as a part of this motion, but talking about on-site administrator, would that be something we would tie into this right now? Or?
You don't have to.
Or do I do
They
those?
said
Go ahead, Corey.
and the project team and I should sit down and talk about this and come up with some proposals first.
Roger, thank you.
So if we award the bid today, Corey, when do you think the building's gonna start getting torn apart?
Well, so what we wrote into the contract was that they can't start until April 30th. So that was, kind of what Steve and the project team felt that they needed to move out and get everybody into the new rental space. And I would anticipate that you're going to have people on site before that. We told them they could take, I think, half of the north parking lot already for job trailers and that. I would expect them to do it. And we also told them they could come in and start to measure and do non-destructive examinations. And so I think you'll see a small presence before April 30th. And I think they're going to hit it hard starting on April 30th. I know we've already got some pre-submittal questions, like on the detention cells, because they want to have those detention cells here in June. So I know that they're chomping at the bit because they want to take advantage of every minute of summer they can.
Which I could hardly blame them. So we award the bid today, the 100 days starts ticking, and they don't really start any demolition until the end of April. We lose a third of that 100 days.
But the 100 days would be from the bid opening, so that would have been from March 3rd.
Oh, so it's already started.
Yeah.
Yes.
June 1st. Cindy?
I guess philosophically, the only other thing I can think of, looking at state forecasts, they keep talking, I was reading an ICER report today talking about the downturn in construction throughout Alaska. And I guess I would be willing to hedge our bets that contractors are going to be hungry and we still could negotiate a fair price if we waited.
Right. That makes sense to me. And we have a little while to look at it. And even past 100 days, they're probably going to want to do the extra work if they can, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, any other discussion on the motion to award the bid to the lowest bidder without alternate 3? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Okay, we have awarded the bid to McG Constructors Incorporated / DCI Joint Ventures for the amount, I don't know what the amount would be, I guess, without alternate 3, so less than $6,852,300 by $213,000. Is it listed in here? 6.6. Okay, it'd be $6,639,300. So it's a done deal.
Thank you.
So now we need to move on to the next.
Get rid of Corey if you don't need him.
Yeah, Corey, you don't need to stay here probably for the approval of the lease with the PIA. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate it. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, now new business is the next item. It's approval of commercial lease agreement between Petersburg Borough and the Petersburg Indian Association. I'd entertain a motion to approve that commercial lease.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by member Gregor, seconded by member Lagadakis to approve the lease with PIA. Discussion?
I was reading in the lease agreement, and it talked about that janitorial services would be on the borough. Would we just move our standard janitorial service over to the PI building?
I can speak to this in a couple levels. Our plan is we're going to do it ourselves. The facility, because PIA is going to handle the bathrooms. We have sole use of a break room. We think we can handle that ourselves. And then our work area is kind of a big rectangular box. It's not a lot of separate offices by any stretch. That, basically we can empty our own trash and vacuum the floor ourselves. So we will see, which is not in any of these numbers, but we'll see roughly about $900 a month savings when we drop the janitorial in this building. So a little bit of savings that we'll catch out of the project budget that's not currently shown in any of these numbers. The reason we didn't account for that is because we weren't exactly sure what we would need until this lease was signed, and whether or not we want to pay someone to come in and do some janitorial. At this point, we think we can handle it ourselves. So. We may come back and argue with you later if we change our minds, but we're going to try.
Cindy?
I recall seeing that there was a 90-day clause in this contract.
Yep.
And that seemed like an exceptional period of time. I'm not sure that PIA has that many other alternatives for people renting this facility. So
I can speak to that.
Okay.
The 90 days that you're referring to, in the original lease, it was in a couple spots. It's been changed. Where it is today is in the termination of the lease.
Okay.
So that if the borough chooses to terminate the lease before the 1 year mark, we need to give 90 days notice and we'll be subject to a 2-month penalty. So in other words, we're going to pay for 2 months even if we're out of the building. Once the initial 12-month term is up, we just need to give 30 days notice.
okay.
And this was trying to be nice to PIA in the sense that they had advance warning and knew how much money they were going to get, and that if in fact we did get out of there early, they were compensated. We don't expect to be out of there early. If you realize, we're going to ask that the lease start probably the 14th of March, which is Monday. We won't be able to be in the building until well after that, but we've got a bunch of technology issues. We've got to cable the building to our needs. There's a whole bunch of work that has to be done, and then you got a 10-month construction cycle, and then we have the time we would need to move back. So we think we'll use every bit of that 12 months, and may have to be talking to them about a 1 month-to-month extension. Hopefully not, but I think there's a likelihood of that.
Cindy?
And then I have a follow-up question to that, because I know people are paying attention to this project and the costs. I've heard you say that you're having staff pack things up. I don't know that I've seen a cost of actually moving from one facility to the other.
There's only $10,000 in the moving budget. Okay. Everything else is going to be done by us. The $10,000 is we don't really know how we're going to spend it yet. It's one of those things that we just threw in there and said, there it is, and do we, Public Works, this is their busiest time of the year coming up, so using them to move everything is going to be tough. We've talked about buying a container because we're short on storage of where to put things while we vacate this building, and so if we did that, you're talking about a couple $3,000 would come right out of that $10,000 right away. So,
but then you could sell it at the back end.
And that was the concept. So we've got $10,000 to play with, and then a whole bunch of hopefully strong backs and willingness among the staff to actually do all this. So we'll see how it goes. That's
okay. Kurt,
you said you were going to have to recable the building and all that. What's going to be the cost of that?
I think the quote we got from AT&T was a couple thousand. We have to run fiber. A lot of this is already built into the project budget on some of that. I think the fiber run, sorry, I can't do it from memory, but was expensive.
It comes from assisted living down, right?
So that when we move to PIA, all of our computer network continues to work. Sure. So we've got those expenses. The challenge is PIA has some older computer cables that are pre-wired. If we want to keep our current network at the speed it's currently going and continue to provide, we have to basically run our own cable. We're buying the cable in bulk, and we're still negotiating whether AT&T will run it or whether PCS, our computer vendor, will come down and do it, or we may run some of it ourselves. It's actually not that difficult to run, but I'm not so sure I want to be the one putting the ends on the cables and all that kind of stuff and screw it up either. So.
One of the upsides to being in the PIA building is that you guys can go to the gym in the during lunch and work out. So.
Well, except that's where we're going is their gym.
Yeah.
We're moving.
Well, that's
Their gym is going
away. Anymore? No, wait a minute.
They're moving the gym. They're moving the gym.
They're moving it elsewhere. Yeah. But won't be where it is today. Okay. So you know where we are, where their current gym is on the second floor. we're in that whole area. We're just going to be in kind of an open office area. We're going to use the file cabinets and some of the desks to kind of do some separation. But reality is we're all going to have to learn to speak quieter, me especially, and have to get used to each other's company.
So this is something I should have asked of Corey. When is the completion date on the project?
Oh, I don't have that in front of me, Mayor.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Just curious.
There's a couple of different dates that are important. One is we do a bunch of work, and then there's a break in the project in the middle that allows the PD to move from where they are into the rehabbed property, and that's under negotiation. The contractor doesn't want that break to be as long as it is, but we're a little concerned about the complexity involved with moving some pretty important equipment from one place to another. So that's a work in progress. I mean, that's one of those things we still have some talking to do with the contractor. And then, so if we can move faster, that means the contractor starts again, and then the project gets done earlier. I think that's going to kind of, we'll have to wait and see until we get into that part of it.
So that should have, yeah.
And so you'll see.
You've given yourselves plenty of time to move, and maybe it'll be shorter, so that'll be a.
Correct. We've told the contractors purposely they can't have full control of the building till April 30th, and we hope that we can do that faster. I don't think we can, but we'll see. And it's a combination of things. It's not just moving stuff, it's setting up our network, it's making sure it all tests out and works properly, and then it's also getting rid of stuff that we have no intention of keeping, and how we're going to do that. And we're going to try to do an auction sale and get rid of stuff. There are certain things like the desk in my office that won't fit in the new building. It won't fit at PIA, so we need to find a way to get rid of it, and hopefully can sell it, and hopefully we don't have to store it. And then we've got things that are going to move from this building, not move to PIA, but we want to keep to move back into the new building with. And that's the stuff we'll have to store. So it gets kind of complicated.
There's no way we can take advantage of state surplus sale the other way and ship things to Juneau, can we?
I don't know. I asked if we could buy things from the state from a furniture perspective, and the answer is yeah, maybe. It's not as easy as it sounds. Ray got me a contact at the state who's responsible for that, and we have not had much luck yet making that work.
Well, I was thinking in terms of getting rid of
right. I think in the state's perspective, they're in the middle of getting rid of stuff more so than they are in getting stuff, and I don't know that we'd have much luck there, but we'll see.
Kurt,
This is just the last time I'm going to rabbit trail, but I know this has nothing to do with the PIA negotiations on the lease agreement, but where's the assembly going to move to?
We thought we'd just set up a tent in the parking lot for you. No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I should not be. We have use of the PIA boardroom, which is their main, and at this time, we're going to try to make that work for the assembly chambers. And by the way, I realize it's not perfect. We can't move this dais, for example.
It's a nice table.
You're going to be
It's a beautiful table.
This thing, by the way, we're still trying to figure out how the heck to replace this or reuse it. But so we're going to have to we're going to work on the PIA room. It's one of the reasons I'm working with KFSK on the new soundboard, so that because it's portable, that allows us to stay the same, so people can still listen. It can still be live streamed. And it's a lot easier to move around. It's smaller equipment. I can tell you the setup for meetings is going to be a lot harder for us because we don't want to leave it out. So if we're getting all new mics and speakers, we're going to have to set it up and then take it back down after the meeting, because they're going to keep using it as their facility as well. And so we've got some, it's going to be a little harder work to do meetings and such, but we think we can make that room work. We could also use the large conference room at the library if we have to. We really didn't want to. Main reason for that was because it means when we go to set the room up, we have to go a lot farther, and it makes it harder for us to, get copies up here, make the chairs are all set up the right way. I mean, it's easier if it's close to where we're actually having our office at that time. But may come down to that. I mean, if PIA if that room doesn't work for us, we may change and go back to the big library.
Cindy?
And this is just one final point. I've had somebody from the public ask that if the artwork that's in this building and on the exterior of this building doesn't get used in the new building, that it be transferred to the Arts Council or retained somehow so that we don't lose that.
Yeah. It is in the documents that the artwork on the outside of the building is actually going to be removed by the contractor, and they must be nice about it because they've been told we're going to, you know, give it to somebody. It's not planned on the new building. It won't fit on the new building, but it was going to be saved. All the artwork on the inside of this building is basically going to be, you know, for example, some things are going to go away, and others are going to be stored until we're back in the building, and then we'll figure out whether or not, you know, it goes back up or not. But we're trying to preserve anything that, you know, the stuff behind here, for example.
And close a museum might be another.
Yeah, and that we're hoping that somebody has interest in some of this stuff. So.
To show you my ignorance, so apparently the funding we have does not require that we have a certain percentage set aside for new artwork, right?
That is correct.
Okay,
That was
good.
one of the, it was originally in the original budget for the project, and it's 2%, the number's like 2%.
Yeah.
And we asked that be removed, and we went through a process of making sure that this building would qualify for that, and in fact, yes. So there's not, we'd love to have art in here. That's not a, but that'll be something we would have to add later, and you know, the assembly can weigh in on that at that point.
Any other comments?
I
Eric?
just had one question that maybe Debbie might be able to answer best. Was so since we have non-exclusive rights to the boardroom that we'd be using for our assembly, would 7 days be enough to give them notice? Because it says we have 7 work days prior to notice intention to use the boardroom. So
I did read that, and so I figured, of course, for our regular meetings, it'll be on the calendar, they'll know way ahead of time. And for any special meetings, I would just notify them, work with them. I'm sure that if it's possible and open, you know, set before the 7-day window, they will let us use it. But if they have something scheduled, we may need to either hold a meeting elsewhere or wait until we can get in. But I don't think that boardroom is that busy. So, and I think that they do want us as renters, and I do think that they'll do their best to accommodate us.
okay.
Okay, any more comments on the lease agreement with PIA? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, we voted unanimously to approve the commercial lease agreement between the Borough and PIA. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.